What if this was your final exam? How well would you score? We're gonna do some paper swapping when this is done, and we're gonna see how well you guys do on this. And some of these questions are pretty easy. Some of them you really have to know yourself, okay?
Well, don't rush us.
Yeah,
That's what I'm gonna start getting.
all right.
Let's go back there.
Yeah, we'll do that too. Get you one of them sheets. All right, right there. What if this was your final exam? Don't say this out loud, just mark it on your paper. The instrument cluster illumination is usually, traditionally, a blank circuit. A blank circuit is one of these. Is it parallel? Is it series parallel? Is it series? Is it Darlington? What kind of circuit is it? It's one of those. That's question number one. Okay? We got a short period of time. We're going to jump to question number two. Quick, technician A says if the tail lamp fuse blows, the instrument lamps will go dark on some vehicles. Technician B says the positive side of a non-energized illumination lamp circuit will show a ground if checked with a test light. Who is correct? All right, we're going to do paper swapping when we're done, see how you did. Technician A says vacuum fluorescent displays and liquid crystal displays work the same way. Technician B says all digital speedometers are sensor driven rather than cable driven, and all analog needle speedometers are cable driven. Who's correct about that? Answer the question. Give you a chance to read that one a little bit. How you like it?
What's a vacuum fluorescent display?
Well, I've got pictures of both of them up here. Yeah. Now this is vacuum fluorescent, that's liquid
Yeah.
crystal. Whoops, why did it go two questions? All right, to determine the full extent of the role a particular electronic component plays in a particular vehicle system, the best place to start is where? Where would you go to do that? You're basically researching, and there's so much of what we do that we have to research this so that we can tell what's what, what's talking to what, who's doing what, who's on first, and who's messed up third base so bad that nobody can play it. Right. Okay. Question 5, no copying. Technician A says the instrument lamps on this vehicle are fed through a rheostat on the headlight switch. Technician B says these lamps won't work unless the trip reset button is pressed. Who is correct? The trip reset button is right here.
What were you saying?
These are the cluster illumination lamps. In the first one, the instrument lamps on this vehicle are fed through a rheostat on the headlight switch. These lamps won't work unless the trip reset button is pressed. Who is correct? Choose your poison. Look at that. That thing has got a bad button in it. I'm going to get him to give me another one. I only push that button one time, it went too flat. Technician A says one good way to check this BMW brake light switch is to bypass it and see if the circuit works. Technician B says checking a load carrying switch with an ohm meter is not always a reliable test. Who's correct? With the key off, if you apply brakes on this vehicle, what will happen? With the key off, if you apply brakes on this vehicle, what will happen? Everybody made their answer? This meter is set to read what? Question 9. What's the difference between a rheostat and a potentiometer? This is a question you're going to have to write out the answer to now. I'm not giving you in 4 quadrants of the clock where you could say, yay, this is what it is. No guessing on this one. You got to have the right answer. And some of you will probably have to read the answers back that the other person wrote. This is a rheostat, this is a potentiometer. Ready? The seatbelt reminder indicator continues to sound. I must have when the vehicle is moving, even though the seatbelt is buckled. In other words, you buckle your seatbelt, you drive off, and you're still hearing ding, ding, ding. You know that thing ding in your ear? Technician A says the vehicle speed signal isn't making it to the gym module. Technician B says the rear seatbelt, excuse me, the seatbelt buckle may need to be replaced. Who is correct on that?
Wait.
Some of these questions require some thought. We're going to discuss them in more detail if we get into the answer part of the test. When we've changed papers and we find out how everybody did. What most probably caused this? A, it's a Ford. B, the starter was bad. C, the starter wasn't properly shimmed. D, the flywheel ring gear was too soft. E, operator error. Or F, cheater pipe. We should have nicknamed Zach Cheater Pipe, you know? This is an actual vehicle we had to fix out here, not, y'all weren't here then, but.
What, this on like a Crown Vic or something like that?
No, y'all weren't here when we fixed this one.
that.
Yeah. This vehicle actually belonged to Alan Cobb's nephew.
Well, a cheater pipe didn't do that. Yes, they should get it to it. I don't know, you could probably make it work on that.
Unless you-
Question 12. Which of these two posts should be connected to the alternator output terminal? Which of these two posts should be connected to the alternator output terminal? The top one, the bottom one, the small one, or none of these?
Right answer, all right, that's good. There you go.
This 36-volt motor fits a GM vehicle, Ford vehicle, BMW. This doesn't fit any vehicle at all.
That was pretty big.
What? It does look pretty massive.
I'm gonna just go with the obvious. It's good.
What's wrong with this starter? Give me a minute to look at that.
The ground?
Oh. Look up.
Did somebody say an answer out loud? That's it. They missed that question automatically.
Okay, I was gonna say anyway.
Or, you know, probably missed it anyway, but
That's
that's
what
okay.
I just, literally just said.
Now I have to pause and tell a story.
Don't tell the story, 'cause
Yeah.
I know. Tell the story.
This
I just
isn't even-
answered, I already figured it out. Don't tell the story.
I'm not telling a story about that starter, it's about something else. I had this leftover fuel pump O-ring for this Taurus I was working on. I had, one came in the kit, and this O-ring here was a really good one, but I was playing around with it, trying to decide what I was gonna do with it. So I went in the parts room, and I could see the parts bins up there. That's kind of like these bins got over here, where they had some of the parts you could see through the door. And I was just horsing around, and I shot that O-ring, and it went way off up in there. I saw it land up in one of them parts bins, and I could see it up in there. And about 2 weeks later, every time I went in the parts room, I'd see it in there. About 2 weeks later, I went in there and says, I need a fuel pump O-ring for a Taurus. And they looked it up, and they says, we don't have one of those. I said, yeah, you do. What do you mean, yeah, you do? You don't know what we got back there. I said, yeah, I can tell you what bin it's in. I said, okay, tell me. He said, right up there, see it? And I pulled it out. How did you know that was up there? I said, I shot it up there. I mean, it just so happened I needed it later, and it was, they said they didn't have one. Save my bacon that way. I'd have probably thrown it away if I hadn't shot it into the parts room.
I don't even understand.
All right, question 5, intermittent starter. This is a 4-channel recording taken during a normal start of this particular car. Notice what these are. Now this is basically a 4-channel Hickok flat recorder that I've got in there. It doesn't plug into the scan, you actually hook it up to This one right here, this is an auxiliary hookup down here. Okay, this is what the normal one looked like. Okay, when it didn't start, we had no starter operation. This is the recording that was taken when we had no starter operation. Here's your choices. A, the battery is weak. B, the spark is weak. C, bad injector, or D, none of these. Now I'll back up and show you how it looked before. That's how it looked when it started. That's how it looked when it didn't start. I imagine there's probably not a whole lot of people that has one of those Hickok 4-channel recorders, but it will save your bacon if you know what to check. All right. Question 16. The customer says since the transmission was removed and reinstalled, the electric liftgate release doesn't work on this vehicle. Technician A says the fuse must be blown. Technician B says the transmission range sensor connector may not be seated correctly. Who's correct? A, B, both, or neither?
Electric lift gate, what does that tell me?
That's a, you know, whenever you push the button and the hatch pops up. Push the button, it goes boom, the hatch. And the only thing he's noticed that doesn't work is the electric liftgate.
Richard, can you point out the lift gate thing? That's it.
We'll call it that one there. I probably should have made sure my words lined up and everything. Should be too long. All right. This reading is A, too low, B, too high. D, C shows a dead battery, D shows a sulfated battery, E shows an inoperative charging system, F shows current draw, G doesn't show anything useful, H can be done left-handed.
So, I mean, it can be shot left-handed, I mean.
You ain't never had anybody ask you for a left-handed bucket antifreeze?
I'll go find one.
Remember, this is electrical class. Okay?
Is this with the vehicle running or anything?
Yeah, it's running. That's a good question, but yeah, it's running. What do these readings tell you? That is an open-ended short answer question. Whenever we get through with these, we're gonna go over them and you're gonna know the answers, and so are the millions of people watching on YouTube.
Well, before you do that, I got 2 questions I want to go back to.
No, we looked at those around
Well, you wanna back up or what? Which question?
Yeah, when we get done, I got 7 and 8 that I didn't.
Oh, you dropped the ball on 7 and 8?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll back up to those.
there.
What is the name of the damaged component on this photo?
I know the name of this. Long clip, pretty nice stuff.
That's a pretty intense zoom in, isn't it?
Yeah.
Could've zoomed out a little more.
That's pretty rough right there.
I will tell you that this is a picture of something off of a Chevy pickup. One we did in here,
Is it a pickup or a Toyota?
a pickup truck. I mean, actually, I don't know if y'all were in on this deal, but. All right, the name of the damaged component.
Yeah, I don't know. That's pretty rough.
What causes this kind of damage? Low voltage, a bad flywheel, an overcharging alternator, a bad torque converter, or a bad ignition switch? All right, I'm gonna go back to those 2 questions you were asking about. There's question 7. There's question 8. Swap papers with somebody. These are the answers. These be the answers. All right, you too.
Oh. Here you go.
Paper swap. This is the answer to this one. Series parallel. You got that?
It just in.
Series parallel. Good deal. Technician A says the tail lamp fuse blows, the instrument lamps will go dark on some vehicles. Technician B says the positive side of a non-energized illumination lamp circuit will show a ground if connected with the test light is correct. Both of them are right. The reason I thought about that was I've seen people put radios in cars, and when they cut those wires, they get their test light and they hook it to hot and they go to checking, and they'll touch that wire that goes to all the dash lights, and because those lights are grounded on the other side and it's a parallel circuit, they'll light the test light and they'll assume that's a ground. And they'll use that to ground their radio, and the radio won't work. I've seen, we've had to go in there and, fix something like that. Technician A says vacuum fluorescent displays and liquid crystal displays work the same way. They don't, actually, they're different. Technician B says all digital speedometers are sensor driven rather than cable driven. That's not right either. Some of the older digital speedometers are cable driven, and just about every speedometer out there nowadays, it's needle driven, is electronic. That's a neither. This is where we're going to go here. We're going to go to description and operation. That's the right answer for that. B, the description and operation page for the system in question. Well, we usually tell you how the modules interface with each other. Question 5. Technician A says the instrument cluster lamps on the vehicle are fed through a rheostat. Now, where are they feeding? Panel lamps feed? Is that fed from a rheostat? Heck no. Ain't no rheostat there. That's basically a computer, right? Technician B says these lamps won't alert unless a trip reset button. What is a trip reset button hooked into the bottom of the lamps for?
Right.
It gets around from the same place they do. That's all the reason it's in there. So it's going to be neither. Technician A says one good way to check this BMW brake light switch is to bypass it and see if the circuit works. Is that a good idea? Nothing wrong with that. Just jump it with a piece of wire. If you check a load carrying switch with an ohmmeter, it's not always a reliable test. You can take a battery cable and grind away every part of that battery cable except for one strand, and if you check it with an ohmmeter, it'll tell you it's just fine. But will it carry a load? No, it will not. That's going to be a vote. With the key off, you apply the brakes on this vehicle, what will happen? Why?
Because the keys, there's a hot side and you use power only when it is on.
Yeah. And so what terminal is the hot side, which terminal is this on the relay?
That's cold.
That's the coil, and that's the ground. Now, that's kind of upside down because usually power comes in from the top, and the way this one's drawn is kind of screwed up. And it only is going to connect those two terminals together when you turn on the key. And so if you turn off the key, there's no path to current. Even if you mash the brake, it's going to stop right there, so nothing electrical is going to happen. Question 8 is set to read what?
20 millivolts DC.
None of the above. That's 20 volts, man. That's just 20 volts. And you see you see that little symbol right there that's got the line with the dots under it? That's talking about DC volts. You see the little wave? That's AC volts, okay? Question 9, what's the difference between a rheostat and potentiometer? A rheostat carries a load, a potentiometer sends a signal. Where's an example of a rheostat on a vehicle? What about some of your older vehicles with your headlight dimmer? Basically, it's going to carry the load of the lights, and you turn it up and down. They do that in a slightly different way now, but they're older, where they had a ceramic resistor with a resistor coil in it, and you turned it over there. The reason it was ceramic was because it needed to handle the heat. And a potentiometer is like a TP sensor, and it just sends a signal. This is Tech B. Technician B says the seatbelt buckle may need to be replaced. if the vehicle speed signal is not making it to the gym module, is that light gonna come on? Donnie worked on a Ranger over there that had one of these, had a little module underneath the seat that was supposed to turn on the seat belt light if you hit 30 miles an hour and you didn't have the seat belt buckled, right? It was a standalone module. Well, that module got internally shorted, and when it hit 30 miles an hour, instead of turning on that light, it was shorting out the speedometer. And so when he hit 30 miles an hour, the speedometer would drop to 0. And boy, that was tricky. The only other time we'd ever seen that was on a F-Series pickup truck that had water damaged junction box. Because all kinds of problems can happen because of that. When the speedometer would hit about 20, 25 miles an hour, it would just quit working and drop to 0. He had the same problem on the Ranger, but it was because of a bad seatbelt module. And it looked exactly the same way. So just keep all that in mind too. You'd be surprised. This thing right here usually is pretty reliable, but when it goes crazy, people are like, what? All right. What most probably caused this? Is this a Ford?
No,
No. How do you know?
because the flywheel bolts.
Flywheel bolts.
I don't know.
Look right here. That's one of the starter bolt holes. See that? On a Ford, the starter goes in that way now. That Trailblazer is going in that way too, when he just pulling the transmission out of it. But this particular one, Alan Cobb's father-in-law replaced the starter on this Cavalier. And when he replaced the starter, it had one of the thickest dadgum shims on it I think I've ever seen. It must have been almost 1/8 of an inch thick. I don't know why it had one that thick. But he figured, in his old school way of thinking, if it had a thick shim on it, I need to put that thick shim back. Well, basically, their starter is got a little variability on those, so you're supposed to shim each starter. The block's always the same, so you're supposed to put different shims based on what makes that particular starter work right. And it barely was touching the flywheel because he had too thick of a shim on it, and that's what happened on that. And so the starter wasn't properly shimmed was the right answer to that question right there. We had to pull the transmission out of that one, put a flywheel in it. All right, which of these two posts should be connected to the alternator out there? Anybody in here run into a situation like this?
I did it in every car.
You did on Nermy's car. On Nermy's car, those yo-yos at the bottom of the hill, bless their hearts, just with all due respect, they hooked his alternator terminal up to this,
Yeah, we had to move it.
and it wouldn't charge. I mean, it was basically, not
Some
going anywhere. That one
starters
right
don't have
there.
nothing to do with it.
Huh?
I mean, some starters don't have nothing to do with alternator.
Say it, over now.
Some starters don't have, like, I knew Terry's went through the starter, but some of them don't.
That's right. But if you're gonna hook it up, you go on any car out there, if you wanted to, you could take that main alternator terminal and hook it right there and it will be just fine. I think a lot of them use that for a junction. But I will tell you this, if you're gonna hook it up to the starter, hooking it up to here, wrong way to go. Hook it up right there, right? And normally they say, hey, my alternator don't work. We got in there and looked at it, and here they put that thing. The reason they put it on this one was on that car it was easier to get to. You know what I'm saying? Have you ever seen somebody say, well, it's easier to get to, so I'll put it over here? That's like the guy that lost his keys under the tree, and he's looking for them under the street light because he can't see under the tree. The keys are over there, man. Just because you can see better out here don't mean it's where you're looking. This right here is basically from a BAS vehicle, and what I mean by that, the kind that's shut off when you stop. They got a 36-volt system. You go to give them the gas, and they take off like a golf cart. They got cars and Chevrolet pickups. I'm gonna do that. That was actually, it's a 36-volt motor off of a Chevy pickup truck that had one of Delta, battery or whatever you call it. BAS system is what they call it on there. But anyway, that's the motor off one of them, and that's the armature on it. What's wrong with the starter? Bad brush ground connection and screw. This lady said you had to hit this starter. It was a brand new starter, and she'd have to hit it every time she started it to get it started. So bad brush ground connection and screw. The brushes are bolted to that back housing right here, and it depends on the ground that gets through those screws for the brushes to actually operate the starter. And that's one we saw out here.
So is it arcing?
It was actually, I was trying to arc, trying to get a connection, but it was going bzz, 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 and that's what was making all that smoky stuff. We screwed that screw out there and brushed it up, put it back in, it fired up just fine. Everything. Huh?
I used to tell a story about it before.
There, see the arcing?
I remember him telling me.
Yeah, I've told, that was something I've covered in here before. That's one of the reasons I put it up there, because I figured y'all would remember it. 4-channel recording, what'd you come up with an answer for this one here?
What did I
What caused that vehicle not to start?
None of the above. It's got a weak battery.
None of these. The PCM relay
The
did not.
battery's still probably the same way it was.
Yeah, see, the battery is still up there where it was. But the PCM never turned on. And because it never turned on, it never allowed the starter to work. And on that part, that's where that was. Customer says since the transmission was moved and installed, this is technician B. This thing right here wasn't plugged in good. That ain't plugged in good, that ain't gonna work. All right, so question 17, this reading is too high. Why is that reading too high? What's the criteria?
0.02,
What's the criteria should it be?
like 0 to 0.02.
So it shouldn't be over 0.1 on the ground side. On the hot side, it can be 0.5. But it's not supposed to be more than 0.1 on that side, so it's too high. Does it make the question more confusing when there's more answers to choose from? Good to know.
Otherwise, I'd have got it right.
Yep. Well, you got it wrong because there's too many answers? All right, what do we get from here? What do these readings tell you?
Voltage drop for series circuit.
You gotta do better than that. Bad or corroded ground? That ground is corroded, or you wouldn't have 1.8 volts there if you had a good
I
ground.
didn't even think about it.
Yeah.
I didn't even notice it.
I drew this myself, so
Voltage
here.
drop, I mean, I'm still right there.
Huh?
It's
Well, obviously,
voltage
it's dropping a little
fuses
bit of
drop
voltage along there, 12.6, 12.3, 12.2. You're gonna expect to drop some, because every connection's got some voltage drop. But you shouldn't have any voltage drop down here on the bottom. You got a better corroded ground. If you got 1.8 volts, that means that lamp's not gonna burn as bright, right? Or whatever load you got down there. What's the name of the damaged component in this photo? That is the commutator on a starter, and this is the brush. And it just burned that thing slam out. Because on that particular one, the battery was kind of weak, and he kept starting and starting and starting and starting with a weak battery. So what you had here is you had a low voltage.
He put starter, so that's the right.
No, he crashed a burn alarm.
It was actually stated on starter.
Yeah, we have very high standards around here, though.
I see.
All right. Okay.